Hello, welcome to my showcase of my course, English 242, American Literature since 1865. The course encompasses major authors and movements in American literature from the end of the Civil War until the present day. It opens with Walt Whitman's Song of Myself and concludes with Kurt Vonnegut's Slaughterhouse-Five. I've taught this course multiple times in the face-to-face environment. I've not yet had a chance to teach it in the online environment. However, I see no reason why an online version would not succeed at least as well as its face-to-face equivalent. As per UNLV university-wide and English departmental policy, I strove to include as much of a variety of genres and perspectives in the course as would have been reasonable for that era. Moreover, I strove to include a variety of written and non-written activities and to pack as many opportunities as possible for discussion. On the instructor information page, I have a picture of me from my PhD graduation, where I'm up on the stage at the Thomas and Mack Center in Las Vegas, shaking hands with then UNLV interim president, Dr. Donald Snyder. Behind me is my dissertation director, Donald Revelle. I've shown this picture to most of my classes at the beginning of the semester and said to them, whatever your goals in life, something like this should be among them. To go across that stage is what you're shooting for. I know it helps because a few of them have told me so after going across it for their own graduations. Beyond that, I list my current preferred email, james.altman@unlv.edu. I always let my students know they can use it whenever needed, and that, barring something horrible unforeseen, I will respond to them in roughly 24 hours. I find my students don't like to be kept waiting any more than I do. Although I'm not currently teaching, I went ahead and listed what I assume my office hours would be if I were actively teaching this course. That's been one of the interesting aspects putting things together so far. Strictly speaking, I have no idea when I'm going to get a chance to teach this course. That said, I'm approaching it as if it needed to be ready next week. I also have a welcome video I made, giving students a short preview of what we're going to be covering in the course, as well as letting them know just how happy I am to be getting a chance to work with them. Now, I saw on the VCU rubric that an explanation or video of course expectations should go on the instructor information page. I made such a video during the first course of this program. It's in the course, but it's under Module 1, where UNLV strongly suggests it should go. Beg pardon if I made the wrong choice on that. The course syllabus and schedule are under the syllabus tab. It includes information on delivery method, as well as course materials, in particular the course textbook and technological requirements, and where to get help with them. As far as I can tell, VCU and UNLV are very similar in that regard. I did my best to approximate dates and stuff based on UNLV's academic calendar. I can't help thinking that whenever it is I get a chance to teach this course online for real, I'll have to adjust that kind of thing anyway. Lastly, there's a bushel of helpful links. Among others are the Academic Success Center, where students can get tutoring, the Office of Information Technology, the Disability Resource Center, digital accessibility policy, the procedure regarding religious holidays, plagiarism, academic integrity, copyright, and fair use. As mentioned on the previous slide, the syllabus contains information on delivery method and technological requirements. As this is an online course, it will be delivered mainly through Canvas, which we call Web Campus. Information on how to access Web Campus is required on every syllabus, not only here at UNLV, but also on every syllabus of every member institution of NSHE. which is the Nevada System of Higher Education, which includes every public institution of higher learning in the state of Nevada. Moreover, those who graduate from Clark County School District, which includes the Las Vegas Valley, have used Web Campus throughout their academic careers through a county-wide and statewide partnership. I suppose that's just a detailed way of saying we don't have to go into a lot of detail about how to use Web Campus most of the time. Our syllabi contain information on how to access and use Zoom and Google Meet. Since the pandemic, these kinds of technologies have begun to be used frequently, not only in online, but also in face-to-face and hybrid environments as well. Zoom is a relatively new addition for us. It's only been with us a little over a year. Previously, we used WebEx. It was spotty at best. However, we might still be using it, except that its parent company overcharged for services and then absconded with the money. All syllabi are also required to contain information on how to contact the UNLV Office of Information Technology, that is OIT. Not only have many of my former students dealt with them for various issues, but some have been employed by them. Never having taught a semester-based online course and not having taken one since I was a first-year master's student, I based the navigation for my course on what I've learned in this program, as well as what I've used for online presentations and what I could glean from friends who teach regularly online. I figured simpler was better. Vertically along the left side of the page, starting from the top, I have home, modules, syllabus, and grades. Each module is self-contained and has in it all the materials needed for 1 week of the course. Each of the modules is labeled to avoid confusion. For instance, the first module is called Week 1, Course Introduction, Background, and the World of Walt Whitman. All the major course readings are in HTML. That way students won't have to worry with the physical class textbook, the Norton Anthology of American Literature 8th edition, if they don't want to. I only use PDFs or Word documents where I cannot avoid doing so, as in if no other form is available. When I worked for the UNLV Office of Accessibility Resources, the OAR, we advised those we worked with to avoid such formats, if at all possible, because of the time and effort commitment needed to make them accessible. What we would tell them is, if you think you need to use a PDF or a Microsoft Word document, ask yourself, does it pass the Beetlejuice test? In other words, can you think of 3 legitimate separate reasons why you need to use the format you are considering as opposed to doing your work in HTML? If you can, that's wonderful. Go ahead and use the format you need to, but understand you're going to have to put in the effort to make it accessible, with which we will gladly help you, but it will take time. If not, we advise you to do your work in HTML. For lack of a better term, I'm pretty manic about checking links and grammar. As it was, that was one of the most important parts of my job when I worked for the OAR. The course content is structured roughly chronologically, starting with Walt Whitman, moving on to Emily Dickinson and Mark Twain, before ultimately ending with the likes of Gwendolyn Brooks, Martin Luther King Jr., and Kurt Vonnegut. Although connections between authors and works may be brought up at any point during the semester by me or by any of the students for any reason, the only author who actively appears in more than one module is Mark Twain. He's part of one module focusing on short fiction, in his case, The Jumping Frog and Roughing It, and a separate module on Huckleberry Finn and criticism related to it. Not only does the chronological structure help students to see the movement of American literature throughout the course, it also helps to chunk the material by keeping it in relatively small units. The works themselves are naturally chunked by way of stanza, chapter, and paragraph breaks. That comes in handy for everyone, myself included. In all honesty, the entire course would be shorter poetry if it were up to me, since it's been my experience. That's what tends to be the most impactful for my students, word for word and line for line. Now that I think about it, I guess that's part of the rationale, isn't it? Speaking of which, no matter what I'm teaching or presenting, I do my best to provide clear, detailed instructions. I always tell my students, if you're left scratching your head about what I want you to do or how I want you to do it, then I haven't done my job. Moreover, not only does UNLV require that we let our students know the rationale for everything we do, but heaven help you if you don't, because you're going to hear, why do we have to do this? Or why do we have to read this stuff? So often, it will make your hair fall out. Consequently, I've done my best to make sure that students know why I want them to do whatever it is I want them to do. Engagement with the content and engagement with students is vital in any subject, all the more so in the liberal arts and humanities. Unfortunately, unlike business and or the hard sciences, most students don't readily see a whole lot of practical application for the arts and humanities. That often leads to a lot of dismissiveness about them. Every assignment I give, whether written or verbal, short or long, is meant to give students skills they can use in the so-called real world. The ability to observe closely and draw inferences from those observations is applicable in many areas of life. Likewise, being able to build a persuasive argument out of appropriate evidence is not just useful in the college classroom. The ability to judge someone else's evidence and argument and to disagree respectfully forms a necessary part of life in any arena. Written assignments and presentations, like reading responses or letters to authors, not only allow for engagement with the text, but also with other students and with me. Respectful, open discussion, where everything is on the table, as long as someone can show it is relevant to the subject matter, is really what pumps my blood and tends to catch and keep students' interest. Individual and group presentations on topics of the students' choosing accomplish the same things. I give my students as much choice as possible of what to write or present about. I don't care much for being told the exact topic to write and or present about. That always felt to me like I was writing or presenting on the topic somebody else didn't want, so they made me do it. I make it a point not to make my students do things I don't like to do unless there is no way to avoid them. One of the very best ways I have found for students to engage with the text, with each other and with me, is through peer review. They usually start out pretty reluctant, but I model it for them, both with them in groups and, when possible, by having friends of mine who are fellow instructors coming in to participate. Most importantly, though, I let the students know there's no pressure on them throughout the process. They are simply another pair of eyes observing what there is to be observed and letting the author know what they find for good, bad, or otherwise. No matter what module we are in, what topic we're covering on a particular day, I always encourage my students to engage with the class textbook every day. Ours is the Norton Anthology of American Literature, 8th edition. Well, to be completely honest, I'm not sure that's the official textbook right now. At least not the edition anyway. It is, however, the only edition from which I taught for several years, and the only one to which I currently have access. If I were to teach this course for real at some point in the near future, I believe I've structured it in such a way that I could quickly retool on account of any changes as far as the textbook. Beyond that, my students and I always engage with the textbook, partially because that's what it's there for, and partially because I want to make sure they get their money's worth out of it. One complaint I've often heard from students is that they spend hundreds of dollars on textbooks that their professors never utilize. I've been in classes like that, and it's made me so mad I've wanted to scream. What I specifically mean by engagement is not just to read the text and talk about it, which we do a lot, but to think and talk about the textbook itself, like, is it a good representation of American literature during the time period it encompasses? Are there any other works that could go in it, and why would they be appropriate? Are there works that should come out because they aren't as good a representation, or because the culture has changed enough where their original meaning is no longer as relevant? Some of the best class discussions I've ever been a part of have focused on these types of issues. I see no reason why that could not transfer to the online environment. Course reserves, and especially open source, are so important in supplementing the text. Not only do they provide extra insights, which the students may or may not have thought of, but if VCU is anything like UNLV, they're required to be free, and so they don't cost any money. Having them online, like they are now, quickly, greatly increases student access and decreases excuses like, I couldn't do my homework because the library was too crowded. Anything we use that we didn't create has to have the copyright information with it. And we put the notice on everything, electronic or otherwise. Our university-approved fair use notice is also on everything, regardless of anything else. I don't do it, but some professors will give their students a quiz on copyright and fair use the first week of the class. And if you don't get an A on it, they have written in their policy that you can't get higher than a B+ in the course, no matter how well you do. Students are paying for the sins of others on that one. I don't know about anywhere else, but UNLV has had a lot of issues with copyright over the years. The online version of my course syllabus has the overall course goals right up front, just like it would have for a face-to-face course. Some of those would be, for instance, for students to identify major authors and works or literary movements, and just as importantly, to identify their place among what we are reading and determine if that place is justified based on evidence. Moreover, goals include for students to develop strong written and verbal skills, as well as to learn to make strong arguments based on evidence, and to observe in order to find that evidence, and to be respectful of all points of view, whether or not they agree with them. Every writing assignment, presentation, and/or discussion works towards at least one of those goals. That is what UNLV means by coherence, and as far as I can tell, based on what I'm learning, what VCU means by alignment. Quizzes and tests work toward the same goals, whether they are formal or informal, written or verbal. Regardless what form we use, we are strongly encouraged to use multiple types of questions. For instance, short answer, matching, multiple choice, fill in the blank, and essay questions. I don't use all of them on every test necessarily, but I try to use at least some of each kind throughout the semester in order to better serve different types of learners. That's the same reason I often give students the choice of what to write about and how to show their knowledge on an assessment, i.e. written, verbal, video, and so on. Multiple means of representation is not just good pedagogy, it also keeps things interesting. Nobody likes them, But every course at UNLV must have a final exam. Many departments have departmental exams, where everybody takes the same exam regardless of their instructor. Thankfully, English doesn't do that. What the English department does do is tell you what form you have to put your exam in, namely an essay exam of no fewer than 2 and no more than 4 questions. The questions have to be detailed enough to where students are writing for the entire length of an exam time. Pre-pandemic, everything had to be done face-to-face in the classroom. I don't know about now. The point is, or was, to make sure that students show through the final exam the breadth and depth of their learning over the course of the semester. Seems to me that can be done just as readily in the online environment. Currently, UNLV adheres to WCAG 2.0/2.1, aiming toward 2.0, achieving 2.1 whenever we possibly can. Moreover, instructors are highly encouraged to implement level 2.2 at every opportunity. I should know, as one of the founding members of the UNLV Office of Accessibility Resources, that is the OAR, I helped to craft, implement, and evangelize UNLV's current accessibility policy. Since accessibility is a journey, and nobody's perfect, and a few lines of improperly formatted text can take a page from compliance to non-compliance, I'll never say that the course I'm building is perfectly accessible. However, I will say that I'm striving to make the whole thing accessible to the greatest extent I can in terms of navigation, wherein things are straight up and down on top of each other. Every module is labeled, every part of every module is labeled. I use automated checkers for things like Microsoft Word, PowerPoint, Excel, and Adobe, and get good use out of them. All the same, as I used to teach people during our Foundations of Accessibility, that is FOA training, those checkers are limited in what they can do because they are very binary. They can tell you whether something is or isn't present, like for instance alt text or spelling errors or whatever. But as I would often demonstrate with my favorite poem, Ode to a Spell Checker, if an element is superficially correct but is used incorrectly, the automated checker won't notice anything wrong. It's like using TOO or TWO when you mean TO. A human has a much better chance of catching that kind of thing. Our team would always tell our attendees, automated checkers are great when you let them do what they're good at doing and you handle the rest. Don't just rely on automated checkers because they may not catch everything, but don't just rely on yourself because you definitely won't catch everything. One specific example is don't rely on your own eyes and what looks good to you when it comes to color contrast.